violations of sovereign countries' airspace are unacceptable. We again urge all concerned to act responsibly, to use all available channels, and to take immediate steps to de-escalate tensions and prevent further risks to regional security. The world simply cannot afford such danger to spiral out of control and for the devastating war in Ukraine to further escalate and expand. Mr. President, over the weekend in Ukraine, Russian drones and missiles continue to hit several regions, killing at least 3 people, injuring dozens more, and damaging civilian infrastructure and residential buildings. Several civilian casualties were reported across the country. According to the Ukrainian authorities, in the central city of Dnipro, a missile with the reported cluster munition hit a residential apartment building, killing at least 1 person and injuring at least 30 others. Local officials reported that 2 people were also killed in the Chernihiv region in the north and the Khmelnytsky region in the west of the country. According to the Ukrainian authorities, over the past week, Russia launched more than 1,500 attack drones, 1,280 guided aerial bombs, and 50 missiles of various types. This represents a clear escalation of Russia's attacks against Ukrainian cities and towns. More casualties were also reported over the weekend in the Belgorod region of the Russian Federation, where, according to local officials, 2 civilians were reportedly killed and 4 injured as a result of Ukrainian shelling and drone attacks. The continuing trend of intensifying widespread attacks once again underscores the need to build on recent initiatives for diplomatic efforts toward peace before the situation reaches even more dangerous levels. We reiterate our call for a full, immediate, and unconditional ceasefire to pave the way for a just, lasting, and comprehensive peace in Ukraine in line with the UN Charter, international law, and relevant UN resolutions. The United Nations remains ready to support all meaningful efforts to this end. I thank you.
I thank Mr. Yencha for his briefing. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Lars Roque Rasmussen, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Denmark.
First of all, I would like to thank Assistant Secretary General Jenka for his informative briefing. 10 days ago, in this chamber, Denmark's representative expressed our condemnation of the violations of Poland's airspace by Russian military drones. And within 4 days, another Russian military drone incursion took place, this time into Romanian airspace. Denmark condemns the violation of the territorial integrity of Romania. And today we meet again, yet again, to discuss a reckless and dangerous violation by Russia, with 3 fighter jets entering Estonia's airspace last Friday. For 12 minutes and penetrating 10 kilometers deep north of Tallinn, until escorted out of Estonian airspace by NATO jets. Let there be no doubt, I condemn this latest violation of Estonia's sovereignty and territorial integrity by Russia. Our support for Estonia remains steadfast. Our resolve to stand by our allies remains equally firm. Together with EU partners and NATO allies, we will continue to offer support to Estonia in protecting its borders. Mr. President, these are reckless and dangerous escalations and provocations by the Russian Federation. These are threats to intimidate countries to stop supporting Ukraine and to test our resolve. Russia clearly feels it can act with impunity in Ukraine, the Baltic Sea, the Black Sea, the whole of Eastern Europe. Denmark and its allies will not be provoked by Russia. On the contrary, It only strengthens our resolve and further intensifying our long-standing support to Ukraine, whatever threats are made. We have seen this playbook before. The invasion of Georgia, the annexation of Crimea, the invasion of the Donbas, the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Russia's neighbors, not unreasonably, fear there could be the next. Denmark stands fully behind Estonia's territorial integrity. The Russian provocations must end immediately. Therefore, we tell the Russian Federation today, step back, take another path. We will not allow the unraveling of the European security architecture. We will not allow Russia to project chaos and uncertainty wherever it wants. And more broadly, these recent air incursions undermine the fundamental pillars of international law that we all benefit from. Mr. President, when the UN was created 80 years ago, the aim was to stop larger states from bullying and terrorizing smaller states, to create an order in which all countries are sovereign, where their territorial integrity is respected. Denmark remains fully committed to these principles. I thank you.
His Excellency Mr. Rasmussen for the statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Georgios Gerapatritis, Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Hellenic Republic.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I would like to thank the Permanent Mission of the Republic of Korea for convening the important emergency meeting. I would like also to thank Assistant Secretary General Jenka for his insightful briefing, and I welcome the participation of fellow foreign ministers and deputy foreign ministers, as well as of the High Representative of the European Union and Vice President Ms. Kallas in this meeting. Dear colleagues, as this organization celebrates the 80th year since its establishment, international order, peace and security are gravely challenged around the globe. It is therefore our urgent and imperative duty to heighten our vigilance and intensify our efforts to meet and contain these challenges, protect international peace and security, and avoid escalations. Only in this way we will be fulfilling the core task of the Security Council. In the course of these last 2 weeks, NATO and EU's airspace has been violated 3 times, as Russian aerial means entered, contrary to international law, the territory of Poland, Romania, and Estonia. The latest incident, involving the incursion of Estonian airspace by 3 armed Russian fire jets, cannot be viewed in isolation. Reckless acts of this kind are not new, but their successive recurrence indicates they are not mere coincidences. As the saying goes, once is an accident, twice is a coincidence, 3 is a pattern. Greece unequivocally condemns the violation of Estonia's, and for that matter, any member state's airspace. We stand in full solidarity with Estonia, a friendly country and an EU and NATO ally. Any violation of state borders, be it air, sea, or land borders, constitutes a clear and blatant breach of international law and the UN Charter, and is unacceptable, particularly coming from a permanent member of the Security Council. We call on Russia to cease these unlawful acts immediately and respect its obligations under international law. Colleagues, it is evident that this new escalation is a direct result of Russia's war in Ukraine. Greece has welcomed President Trump's initiative for meeting President Putin in Alaska in August, as well as any initiative that could result in the termination of the war. Nevertheless, these violations, as acts of aggression, contradict the spirit of the Anchorage meeting. Lastly, dear colleagues, we're now witnessing the destabilizing effects of the war and its wider implications for the security of Eastern Europe and of the wider region. This is why, once again, we call on Russia to stop its armed aggression. A comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in Ukraine, based on the principles of sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of states, must remain our foremost goal. A peace safeguarded by credible and robust security guarantees, which will effectively deter any recurrence of armed aggression, that precludes further escalation, and that is in line with international law, the UN Charter, the General Assembly resolutions, and the Helsinki Final Act. I thank you.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Gerard Patriotis for the statement. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Mr. Yvette Cooper, MP, Secretary of State for Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Affairs of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to the Assistant Secretary General for that briefing. For 3.5 years, the world has witnessed a permanent member of this Council engaged in the full-scale and unprovoked invasion of another state, a violation of its most basic obligations under the UN Charter. As President Trump and President Zelensky have worked for peace, the Russian Federation has starkly escalated its attacks. Attacks on the Council of Ministers, on the British Council building, and repeated attacks on residential flats and homes as children sleep in their beds. And we meet today now at the request of Estonian allies because Russia's recklessness is escalating. In the last 2 weeks alone, over 20 Russian drones in Polish airspace, a drone through Romanian territory, and now 3 Russian MiG-31 fighter jets with their transponders turned off, violating Estonian airspace for 12 minutes. At best, these latest acts are dangerous and reckless. At worst, they are a deliberate attempt to undermine the territorial integrity of sovereign nations and European security. They risk miscalculation. They open the door to direct armed confrontation between NATO and Russia. NATO's combined strength is unparalleled, and its determination to defend peace and security in Europe is unshakable. Of this, Russia must be in no doubt. And I commend the resolute and firm response of Estonia, Poland, and Romania, and all NATO allies. I welcome the launch of Eastern Sentry on 12th of September to ensure the safety and security of the alliance's eastern border, and I'm proud that UK aircraft are taking part. And to those nations and to all NATO allies, I say, the United Kingdom stands in full solidarity with you at this time and always. And to President Putin, I say, your reckless actions risk a direct armed confrontation between NATO and Russia. Our alliance is defensive, but be under no illusion. We stand ready to take all steps necessary to defend NATO's skies and NATO's territory. We are vigilant and we are resolute. And if we need to confront planes that are operating in NATO airspace without permission, then we will do so. The United Kingdom stands by our friends. We are unwavering in our support for the principles of the UN Charter, for our NATO allies, and for Ukraine. And we are committed to increasing the pressure on Russia until it ends its illegal war against Ukraine, ceases its reckless acts, and respects the sovereignty of other states. Russia's imperialist warmongering is a threat to international peace and security. It is a threat to the values and principles that underpin this organization that has done so much to support stability and prosperity these past 80 years. We must counter it for the sake of us all. Thank you.
I thank Her Excellency Ms. Cooper for her statement. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Ms. Melita Gabric, Deputy Minister for Foreign and European Affairs of Slovenia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also want to thank the Assistant Secretary General, Mr. Miroslav Jenča, for your important contribution. Excellencies, we are meeting here for the second time in just 10 days due to the reckless behavior of the Russian Federation that poses a threat to international security. 10 days ago, we discussed a drone incursion into Polish airspace, an incident involving more than 20 drones, making a significant escalation in scale and intensity. Today, we are addressing a new provocation: Russian fighter jets incursion into Estonian airspace, an incident that was not merely momentary, but deliberate and dangerous. Slovenia supported the call for this meeting, and we stand firmly and without reserve with Estonia, its security, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. Excellencies, let me say this in no uncertain terms. We condemn this escalation. At a time when tensions are already dangerously high, this is not the moment for military provocation. This is a high time for dialogue, a high time for diplomacy. When we previously discussed the drone incursion into Poland, our ambassador spoke of the growing unease with which we are witnessing such behavior across Europe. Let us be honest with ourselves around this very table of the Security Council. These actions do not occur in a vacuum. They are unfolding as we are well in the 4th year of Russia's illegal war of aggression against Ukraine. These deliberate provocations are symptomatic of the time we live in, a time in which violations of international law are tolerated to an extent we have not seen in modern history. Slovenia says a clear and principled no to such behavior wherever it may occur and whoever may be the perpetrator. If we can clearly say no to Israeli atrocities committed in Gaza, to terrorist violence, we must not shy away from condemning Russian aggression against Ukraine. Excellencies, let us also be clear on another matter. Europe wants peace. Europe wants a ceasefire, and we want to see the beginning of serious and meaningful peace negotiations between Ukraine and the Russian Federation as soon as possible. Despite the best efforts by President Trump in Alaska, we still await a meaningful gesture from Russia, a sincere willingness to come to the negotiating table. And while we wait, Russia continues its escalatory behavior, intensifying attacks on Ukrainian cities and endangering and intimidating civilians both in Ukraine and in its neighboring countries. We hope the time is near when this Council will finally begin a principled and honest discussion about the war in Ukraine and decide to take action. Until then, and allow me to repeat this, Slovenia will stand firmly with Estonia, with Ukraine, and with any other member of this organization that needs to be protected from unlawful, charter-violating actions by those who believe that might makes right. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Her Excellency Ms. Gabrich for her statement. I now give the floor to the representative of France.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Je remercie tout d'abord
I'd
le
like to
secrétaire
begin
général,
by
Monsieur
thanking
Miroslav
Assistant
Jenša.
Secretary General Mr.
son intervention.
Miroslav Jenša for
Je
his
voudrais saluer la
statement,
présence
and I
ministérielle à
would
cette
like to
réunion
welcome
d'urgence,
the ministers
notamment
present
celle du
here,
ministre des Affaires étrangères de la
Foreign
République
Affairs
d'Estonie
Minister of
et celle de la haute
Estonia,
représentante
and
de
from
l'Union
the
européenne,
other
Mme
representatives from the European Union.
Nous savons, la Russie a violé
Madam Kallas.
le 19 septembre au
As we know,
matin
on the morning of 19th of
l'espace
September,
aérien
Russia
estonien
violated Estonian
avec
airspace
3 avions de
with
chasse
3 fighter
qui sont
jets,
restés près de
which
12
remained there for nearly 12 minutes.
Ces éléments nous
These
conduisent à
elements
considérer qu'il s'agit
lead us
d'une
to
violation
consider that this is
intentionnelle.
an intentional violation.
Il s'agit en 10 jours
This is the
C'est la
third
troisième
time in
fois
10 days
que la Russie
that
viole
Russia has
l'espace
violated
aérien
the airspace
de l'Union
of
européenne
the
et
European
de l'OTAN.
Union and NATO.
Cette dernière incursion
This latest
ne
incursion
laisse aucune place au doute.
leaves no room for
La
doubt.
Russie choisit
Russia
l'escalade.
is choosing
et la provocation.
escalation and provocation.
Monsieur le Président, ce
Mr.
Conseil
President,
s'était
this
déjà réuni
Council
il y a exactement 10 jours pour
Had already
évoquer
met
l'intrusion
exactly 10 days
inadmissible
ago to
d'une
discuss
vingtaine de
the
drones russes en
unacceptable
Pologne,
intrusion of
dans le
around
contexte
20 Russian
d'une
drones
attaque
into
aérienne
Poland
massive
in the
contre
context of a
l'Ukraine.
massive aerial attack against
Cette nouvelle
Ukraine.
violation,
This new
cette fois
violation,
opérée
this time carried
en plein
out
jour
in broad
et
daylight
par
and
pas moins de 3 avions de chasse,
by no fewer than
et sans
3
précédent
fighter
depuis
jets,
plus
not
de 20 ans.
drones, is unprecedented in over
Elle
20
vient confirmer
years.
la
It
poursuite
confirms
et
the
l'accumulation
continuation
des
and
actions
accumulation
provocatrices de
of
la Russie.
Russia's provocative actions.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr.
la France
President,
condamne
France
avec la plus
condemns
grande
in the
fermeté cette
strongest
incursion
terms this
dangereuse et
dangerous and
irresponsable qui
irresponsible
constitue une
incursion,
violation
which
flagrante du droit
constitutes a
international.
blatant violation of international
Elle se
law.
tient fermement
And
aux
we
côtés de
stand
l'Estonie,
firmly
à
alongside
qui nous
Estonia,
exprimons notre amitié
to whom we
et notre
express our
solidarité
friendship and
pleine
our
et entière.
full and unwavering solidarity.
La France contribue
France
directement à la
directly
sécurité de l'Estonie.
contributes to
Elle
Estonia's
participera
security.
au
We
renforcement de
participate
notre
in
posture de
the
sécurité sur le
strengthening
flanc
of our
est de
security
l'Europe,
posture on
aux côtés de
Europe's
nos alliés
eastern
de l'Union
flank,
européenne et de l'OTAN.
alongside our allies in the European Union and NATO.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. President,
nous ne devons pas
we
oublier que
must
dans le
not
même
forget
temps, la Russie
that at the
poursuit
same
sa guerre
time,
d'agression contre
Russia
l'Ukraine.
continues its war of aggression against Ukraine.
Quelques heures après cette
Just
incursion,
hours after this
la Russie
incursion,
procédait
it
à une
once again
nouvelle fois à des
carried
frappes
out
massives contre l'Ukraine,
massive strikes
employant
against
40
Ukraine,
missiles
using
et près
40
de
missiles and over
550 drones.
550 drones.
La Russie doit bien réaliser
Russia must
que ces
understand
violations de
that
l'espace
these
aérien de l'OTAN
violations of NATO
n'entament
airspace
en aucune
in
manière
no way
notre intention
undermine our
de mettre en œuvre
determination
des
to
garanties de
implement
sécurité
strong,
solides, robustes
robust
et crédibles
and credible
en faveur de
security
l'Ukraine.
guarantees in favor of Ukraine.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr.
l'Ukraine
President,
a courageusement
Ukraine
accepté il y a
courageously
désormais 6 mois le
accepted
principe
6
d'un
months ago
cessez-le-feu
now the
inconditionnel.
principle of an unconditional ceasefire.
Elle a démontré sa
It has
volonté de négocier.
demonstrated its willingness to
Le président
negotiate.
Volodymyr Zelensky a
President
exprimé depuis
Volodymyr
4 mois
Zelensky
désormais
has, for
sa
the past 4 months,
disponibilité pour des
expressed his
négociations
readiness for
directes
direct
avec le
negotiations
président Vladimir
with
Poutine.
President Vladimir Putin.
Alors que l'ensemble des dirigeants du monde
Yet,
se
as
retrouvent à New
world
York à
leaders
l'occasion
gather
de la
here in New
célébration
York to mark
des
the
80 ans
80th
des Nations Unies,
anniversary of the United Nations,
cette rencontre
such
n'a
a
toujours
meeting
pas eu lieu.
has still not taken place.
La Russie
Russia,
continue au contraire son
on the
agression.
contrary, continues
La
its
Russie
aggression,
amplifie
and
maintenant ses
Russia
actions
is now
d'intimidation contre les
escalating
voisins de l'Ukraine.
its intimidation
Elle
of
continue
Ukraine's
d'enfreindre et de
neighbors. It
saper les
continues to
principes de la Charte
violate
des
and
Nations
undermine
Unies,
the principles of the UN
l'intégrité
Charter,
territoriale
the
et la
territorial
souveraineté
integrity
des
and
États.
the sovereignty of states.
Il appartient à la Russie
It
de
is up to
saisir
Russia
l'offre faite
to
d'un
seize the
cessez-le-feu
offer
et
of a
d'ouverture de
ceasefire
négociations
and the
qui
opening
sont
of
appelées de leur vœu
negotiations
par le
as
secrétaire
called
général
for
des
by the
Nations
UN
Unies et par
Secretary
l'ensemble de
General
la
and
communauté
the entire
internationale.
international community.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr.
il est
President,
de notre
it is our
responsabilité, membres du
responsibility
Conseil de
as members of the
sécurité, de
Security
reconnaître
Council
l'évidence
to
et d'appeler la
acknowledge the
Russie
obvious
à
and to call
cesser ses
upon
prises de
Russia
risques
to end these
irresponsables
reckless
et à mettre fin
provocations
à la guerre à
and to
grande
put an
échelle
end to the
qu'elle a
large-scale
déclenchée il y a
war
plus de
that it
3 ans
launched more than 3
sur le
years ago
continent
on the
européen.
European
Je vous
continent.
remercie.
Thank you.
I thank the representative of France for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of China.
President,
我感
I
谢
thank
严洽助理
ASG
秘书长的
Yan
通
Cha
报，
for his
也
briefing
欢迎
and welcome
爱沙尼亚
the
等
high-level
有关国家的高
representatives
级
of
别代表
Estonia
参
and
加
other
今天的
relevant
会议。
countries to the meeting today.
主席，
President,
安理会今天讨论的
the
领空
airspace
事件
incident
和几
discussed
天
by the
前讨
Security
论的
Council
无
today
人
and
机
the
事
drone
件
incident discussed a
都
few
是
days
乌克
ago
兰
are
危
both
机的
spillover
外溢
effects
结果，
of the Ukraine crisis.
是有关各方互信
They
缺
reflect
失
the lack of
疑
mutual
虑增
trust
加
and
的
growing
表现，
suspicions among relevant
也
parties
是当前欧洲
and
安全局
illustrate
势
the complex
复
and
杂
sensitive
敏感的
nature
写
of the
照。
current European security
乌克
situation.
兰危机一
As
日不
long
解
as the
决，
Ukraine crisis remains
战争多
unresolved
持
and
续
the
一
war
天，
continues,
类似的事
similar
件就有
incidents
可
are
能再
likely
次发
to
生。
reoccur.
所以，当务
Therefore,
之急
the
和
urgent
根本之策
imperative and
是
fundamental
早日
solution
实
are
现
to
乌克
realize a
兰危机
political
的政治
resolution
解
to the
决，
Ukraine crisis as soon
构
as
建均
possible
衡、有
and to
效、
build
可
balanced,
持续的
effective, and
欧洲安
sustainable
全架构。
European security architecture.
关于乌克兰危
Regarding
机
the，Ukraine
我们此前
crisis,
曾多
we
次
have
在安
fully
理会
elaborated
全
our
面阐述
position
中
on
方立场。
multiple occasions at the Security
明天
Council
安理会
before.
还将举行乌
Tomorrow,
克
the
兰问题
Council will
的
hold a
高
high-level
级别会
meeting
议，
on the issue of Ukraine,
届时中方
when
会
China
再做
will
阐述。
expound our position
今天我
again.
就不展开。
I will not go into details today.
关于领空事
On
件，
the airspace
中方敦促
incident,
当事
China
方
urges the
保持
parties
冷静
concerned
克
to
制，
remain calm and exercise
通过对
restraint,
话沟通
clarify
澄
facts
清
and
事
dispel
实，
doubts
消除疑虑，
through dialogue
避
and
免
communication,
误解、
avoid
误判。
misunderstandings and
防止
misjudgments,
事
and
态
prevent the
扩大
situation
升级。
from expanding or
我
escalating.
们一贯主张
We always
各国
maintain
遵
that
循
countries
联合
should
国
follow
宪
the
章的
purposes
宗旨
and
和原
principles
则，
of the UN
处理国
Charter
际关
in
系。
handling international relations.
谢谢主席。
Thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China for the statement. statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Somalia.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, I would like to thank ASG Yancha for his briefing on the development in the Baltic Sea region. I welcome His Excellency, the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Estonia, to this meeting, as well as the representative from the region. Mr. President, the situation in Eastern Europe remains a significant concern, carrying serious implications for regional stability and international norms. The divergent narratives surrounding the events of September 19, which are happening against the backdrop of the ongoing war in the region, underscore the urgency of the situation and the critical need for diplomacy and dialogue. Such incidents highlight the fragility and volatility in the region, reminding us of the fundamental principles enshrined in international law and the United Nations Charter, including the peaceful resolutions of disputes. We firmly maintain that there is no military solution to disagreements over airspace or territorial integrity. Continued escalations only serve to heighten tensions and undermine the process for a durable peace in the region. We believe that lasting solutions are found at the negotiating table, not through acts that can be interpreted as hostile. In this regard, we call upon all parties to exercise maximum restraint and engage in earnest, substantive dialogue. A durable solution will require a genuine commitment to de-escalation, confidence-building measures, and renewed focus for diplomatic efforts. To conclude, Mr. President, my delegation reaffirms its unwavering support for all efforts aimed at upholding the principles of international law and achieving just and lasting solutions consistent with the United Nations Charter. We firmly believe that the people in the region deserve a future defined by peace, security, and stability. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Somalia for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Russian Federation.
Спасибо, господин председатель.
Thank you, President.
Были времена,
There was a time
когда Европа у
when
многих
Europe,
из нас ассоциировалась с
for many of
эпохами
us, was
Возрождения,
associated
Просвещения,
with the Renaissance,
передовой
the
философией,
Enlightenment,
культурой,
cutting-edge
наукой.
philosophy, culture, and science.
Однако сегодня все
Yet
это, к
today,
сожалению,
all of that,
безвозвратно ушло в
unfortunately,
прошлое.
has gone, and it's gone for good.
Вольтера,
Voltaire,
Канта
Rousseau,
и других
Kant,
передовых
and other
мыслителей
leading philosophers
заменили
have been
фон дер
replaced with
Ляйены,
the von der
Калласы,
Lyons, the
Джонсоны
Callas's, and
и
the
другие
Johnsons,
мелкотравчатые и
as
зашоренные
well as other
русофобы,
small-time
стараниями
blinkered
которых
Russophones, thanks
пещерная
to their
ненависть к нашей
efforts,
стране и
primitive
стремление
hatred for our
представить ее
country,
главной
and an
угрозой
attempt to
для
portray Russia
общеевропейской
as the main
безопасности,
threat to pan-European
на наших
security,
глазах становится
is
единственной
before our
идеологией для
very
европейских
eyes becoming
государств.
the only ideology of European
Молодое
states.
поколение всеми силами
They're
старается
trying their
заставить забыть
utmost to
горький
make
опыт таких
the next
предшественников
generation
нынешних
forget the
евроинтеграторов,
bitter
как
experience
Наполеон
of
или Гитлер,
predecessors of today's
сломавших
Euro
зубы
integrators.
о
For
нашу
instance,
страну,
the experience of
за что
Napoleon
вся
and
Европа
Hitler,
долго и
who suffered
болезненно
defeat at our
расплачивалась.
country's hands, for which Europe paid a
Любые
lengthy and
события
painful price.
немедленно
Any
интерпретируются в
events are
антироссийском
immediately
ключе.
interpreted through
Мысль
an
о том, что
anti-Russian
война с Россией
prism.
неизбежна,
The very
яростно
idea that
вбивается в
war
головы
with Russia
европейских
is
обывателей.
unavoidable is being frantically pounded
На
into the
Россию
heads of
навешивают
the European
ярлыки,
populace.
лепят из нее образ
Russia is being
врага,
branded all sorts of
в
things,
принципе не
portrayed as an
утруждая
enemy,
какими-либо
not
фактами
even
или
going to the trouble in
доказательствами.
principle of using
А
facts
когда
or
утверждения
evidence.
оказываются ложными,
When these assertions
никто
turn out to
даже
be
не
false,
думает
no one
извиняться
even
за распространение
thinks
очевидной
about
лжи.
apologizing for spreading such blatant lies.
Сегодня у нас
Today,
будет прекрасная
We
возможность
will
в
have
этом
an excellent
убедиться,
opportunity to see this for
с
ourselves.
учетом набившейся в зале
Given that
европейской
in the
массовки,
room we have a lot of European extras.
которая будет, как обычно,
These extras will, as
на
per
все лады
usual,
фантазировать насчет российской
will
угрозы.
be letting their imaginations run wild regarding the threat from Russia.
Эта паранойя
This
достигает невиданных
paranoia
высот.
has reached never-before-seen heights.
Только на прошлой
Just last
неделе мы
week, we
вынуждены
were
были
compelled
выслушивать в этом
to
зале
listen in this
голословные
chamber to
утверждения
groundless
о залете в воздушное
accusations
пространство
about
Польши якобы
supposedly
российских
Russian
беспилотников.
UAVs entering
Ни
Polish
одного
airspace.
подтвержденного
Not a single
доказательства
piece of
того, что эти
evidence
дроны имели
that these
российское
drones were
происхождение,
of Russian provenance
до сих пор не представлено.
has been provided to date.
Показательно и то, что
It's
всего через
telling
несколько
that
дней
just a
стало
few
известно,
days later,
инцидент с
we
повреждением
heard
крыши
that the
жилого
incident
дома в
involving damage
Люблинском
to
воеводстве,
the roof of a
ставший
residential
ключевым
house
элементом этой
in Lublin
антироссийской
province,
кампании,
which
на
was a key
деле
component of
оказался
this
следствием
anti-Russia campaign,
ошибочного
in
сброса
reality
ракеты с
was the
польского
result of a
истребителя.
missile erroneously being dropped from a Polish fighter jet.
А польский премьер Туск сегодня признал,
The Polish Prime Minister
что
Tusk
ни
today
один
recognized that
найденный
not
дрон
a single
не был
drone
начинен
that was found
взрывчаткой и не представлял
contained
угрозы мирным
explosives.
гражданам.
Not a single one posed a threat to civilians.
Польская же оппозиция прямо
For
указала,
the
что
Polish
речь идет об
opposition, it
откровенной
clearly
провокации с
said
целью
this is a
попытаться
blatant
втянуть
provocation,
Польшу
the
в
aim
войну.
being to pull Poland into war.
Господин председатель, мы
President,
весьма серьезно относимся
we
к
take very
обвинениям в адрес
seriously
наших вооруженных
allegations
сил.
against our armed
Всегда
forces.
стремимся
We always
получить
try to get
факты,
the
которые
facts
позволили
which
бы понять,
should
что
allow
же
us
в
to
итоге
understand
произошло.
what actually happened.
Поэтому, стремясь разобраться в
This is
ситуации,
why,
мы
in trying to get to the
незамедлительно
bottom of the
предложили
situation,
польской
we
стороне
immediately
провести
proposed
двусторонние
for the
консультации.
Polish side to engage in bilateral
Однако
consultations
какой-то
with
адекватной
us.
реакции на эту
Yet
инициативу
we
со
didn't get
стороны Варшавы
a
так и не
sensible
последовало.
reaction from Warsaw.
Это свидетельствует лишь об
This
одном.
attests to
Правда ни
only one
Варшаве, ни
thing.
Брюсселю не нужна.
Neither Warsaw
Им
nor
нужен лишь
Brussels
повод
want
для
the
нового
truth.
витка
All they need is a
русофобской
pretext
кампании.
for a new wave of
Тут
the
сложно даже
Russophobia
что-то
campaign we're
комментировать.
engaged in.
Уж слишком
It's very
явно
difficult
наши
to
европейские
comment.
соседи сами
Our
себя
European neighbors are
изобличают.
inculpating themselves so
Человек со
obviously.
здоровой психикой,
Anyone of
который
sound
знаком
mind,
хотя бы с
anyone
основами логики,
who
никогда не
is
признает
familiar
подобную
with
ситуацию
elementary
нормальной.
logic would never say
Но
such a
если вам со
situation
всех
is normal.
экранов, из
But yet,
соцсетей,
if
и со
on
страниц
every screen,
внушают,
in
что
every social
Россия ваш
media outlet,
единственный
on
враг,
every page, you're
то
being
поверить
told that
можно
Russia
во
is
все,
your
что
only
угодно,
enemy,
и факты
then
и
you might start
доказательства здесь
believing
только
anything and
мешают.
everything. The facts, the evidence here are superfluous.
Сегодня мы с вами вынуждены
Today,
присутствовать на
we're
второй
compelled
части этого
to be
спектакля под
here to
названием
watch part
«Обвиняй во
two
всем
of this
Россию».
spectacle entitled Blame
Нашим
Russia for
соседям теперь
Everything.
померещилось, что по вине
Our
России
neighbors
произошло
have
нарушение воздушного
now
пространства
imagined
Эстонии.
that Russia is at fault for an incursion into Estonian airspace.
Доказательств, как всегда, нет.
As
Кроме
always, there is no
русофобской
proof
истерики
except
Сталина, которую нам
the
сегодня в красках
Russophobic
продемонстрирует
hysteria
эстонский
coming from
коллега.
Tallinn, which our Estonian colleague will
А между
wax
тем
lyrical
факты
about a little bit
свидетельствуют о
later.
том, что 19 сентября
As for the
3
facts,
российских истребителя
The facts prove
МиГ-31
that on the 19th of
осуществили
September,
плановый
3
перелет из Карелии
Russian
на аэродром, расположенный в
MiG-31
Калининградской
fighter
области,
jets conducted a planned
который
flight from
выполнялся
Karelia
строго
to
в
an airbase
соответствии с
in
международными
Kaliningrad
правилами
Oblast,
использования
carried out in
воздушного
strict accordance
пространства.
with international airspace use rules.
Российские воздушные суда
Russian
не отклонялись
aircraft
от согласованного маршрута
Did
и
not
не
stray from the
пересекали
agreed route,
воздушное
nor did they
пространство
cross
Эстонии.
into Estonian
Их траектория
airspace. Their
проходила над нейтральными
trajectory,
водами
or their flight
Балтийского
was
моря,
over the
на
neutral
удалении
waters
более
of the
3
Baltic
километров
Sea,
от
over 3
острова Вайнло.
kilometers from the island of Windlow.
Это подтверждается данными
Flight
средств
recorded
объективного
data
контроля.
confirm this.
Если бы в Эстонии этого
If
хотели, то
Estonia
могли бы
wanted
сами в
to,
этом
it
убедиться.
could have checked this itself.
Но такой цели у
But
Таллина
Tallinn
нет.
is not pursuing
Задача
such an
состоит в
objective.
другом.
Their goal
Вопреки фактам и
is
здравому
different,
смыслу
going
нагнетать
against common
истерию и
sense
обвинять
and the
Россию в
facts to
провокации.
foment hysteria
И вот уже
and
представители
accuse Russia
НАТО
of
сразу
provocations.
же
Thus,
поспешили
NATO
назвать
representatives
происходящее безрассудным
rushed to
поведением.
call what happened reckless
А глава
behavior.
европейской
And the head of
дипломатии
European
и по
diplomacy,
совместительству
who also
эстонка
happens to be
призвала
Estonian,
к твердой позиции в
called
поддержку
for a
стран
firm
Балтии.
stance in support of the Baltic states.
Откровенно говоря,
perfectly frank,
нашим
our
европейским
European
коллегам можно только
colleagues
посочувствовать.
deserve our sympathies.
Ведь годами
After
создаваемый на
all, the
наших границах
project they've
проект
been building
«Антироссия»,
on our borders
в
for
которую
years, the
после
anti-Russia
2014
project,
года
and
превратили
this is what
Украину,
Ukraine was actually turned
трещит по
into
швам
after
и сам
2014.
себя
This project is
дискредитирует.
coming apart at the seams.
Эта страна давно
discrediting
уже стала
itself.
концлагерем имени
Ukraine
Зеленского и не
became the
жалеет своих
Zelensky
граждан,
concentration camp long
тысячами
ago. It's not
ежедневно
sparing
погибающих
its
в
people.
бессмысленной
They're dying by
мясорубке
the
за западные
thousands every
геополитические
day in a
интересы.
senseless meat grinder in
Режим
the name
Зеленского
of
довел свою
Western
страну до
geopolitical
того, что она стала
interests.
символом коррупции,
Zelensky's
откровенного
regime has
воровства,
turned its country into a
нарушений
symbol of
прав
corruption,
человека,
outright
свободы
theft,
слова и
violations of human
вероисповедания.
rights, the
А ведь
freedom
в
of religion and
европейских
freedom of
столицах,
speech.
несмотря на все это,
In
по
European
инерции
capitals,
по-прежнему
despite all of this,
превозносят так
they
называемые
continue to
достижения
laud
Украины
so-called
и выделяют
Ukrainian
киевскому режиму
achievements,
деньги и
giving
оружие,
money and weapons to the
явно все
Kiev
больше
regime.
испытывая чувство
Although
стыда за
they're
своих
clearly
марионеток
increasingly
и не
ashamed of their
понимая,
own
как
puppets.
выпутаться из этой непростой
However,
ситуации.
they can't understand how to disentangle
В
themselves
итоге
from
не
this
особо
fix.
креативные
As a result,
евробюрократы не
not so
находят ничего
creative
лучше, чем
bureaucrats have
нагнетать
found nothing better to
антироссийскую
do
истерику,
than to whip up
надеясь, что европейские
anti-Russian
избиратели
hysteria in the
ничего не
hope that
заметят.
European voters won't notice.
Странная
This is
стратегия,
a
и результат
strange
у нее,
strategy,
разумеется, будет
and
обратным.
without a doubt, it will
В
achieve
чем
the
еще
opposite
нашу
of what
страну в
it
ближайшее
intends to
время
do.
обвинят,
What
не
will they
утруждая
accuse
себя ни
Russia of
доказательствами, ни
next? After
логическими
all, they're not
объяснениями
bothering
наших действий.
to check the evidence nor the
Даже
logical
сложно
rationale
предположить, каков
for
может
our
быть полет
actions.
фантазии в
It's hard to
ситуации, когда
think
факты
where
никого
their
не интересуют.
imaginations will take us next when no one cares about the facts.
Господин председатель,
President,
мы, разумеется,
without a doubt, we
понимаем и то, что
understand
истерика
that
наших
the
европейских
hysteria
коллег
of our
не в
European
последнюю
colleagues
очередь направлена на то, чтобы
is
попытаться вернуть
also
на
directed at
антироссийский
trying
курс
to
новую администрацию
return
США во главе с
the
президентом Трампом.
new US
Подорвать
administration, including President
договоренности и
Trump,
понимание,
to
достигнутые
an
российским и
anti-Russia
американским
course.
президентами
It's
на
aimed at
Аляске месяц
undermining the
назад.
understandings and undertakings entered into by
Позволю
Russia and
себе
the
процитировать в этой
US by
связи
their presidents in
вице-президента
Alaska a
США
month
Джей Ди
ago.
Венса,
On this note, I'd like
который
to
на
quote
конференции по
the US Vice
безопасности в
President
Мюнхене в
J.D.
начале этого года
Vance, who
озвучил
at
следующие
the
весьма
Munich
нелицеприятные
Security
для
Conference
Европы
at the start
выводы.
of this year voiced some uncomfortable possible conclusions and comfortable for
Угроза,
Europe.
которая меня больше всего
The threat,
беспокоит в
and here I
отношении
quote, the
Европы,
threat
это
that I
не
worry
Россия, не
about
Китай,
vis-a-vis
и
Europe is
не
not
любой
Russia,
другой
not China,
внешний
it's not
актор.
any other actor,
Меня
external
волнует
actor.
угроза
What I
изнутри,
worry about is the
отступление
threat from
Европы
within,
от некоторых
the
ее
retreat
важнейших
of Europe
ценностей,
from some of its
которые она
most
разделяет с
fundamental
США.
values shared with the United States, end of quote.
Несмотря на очевидный диагноз,
Despite this
содержащийся в
clear-cut
этих словах,
diagnosis
в Европе
contained
предпочли
in the
пропустить его
aforementioned
мимо
quote,
ушей.
Europe decided
Европа
not to
сейчас
listen.
как
Europe
неуравновешенный, параноидальный
today
человек,
is like an
абсолютно не
unhinged,
способный реагировать
paranoid
на критику.
individual, unable to respond
Как
to
и помнить
criticism.
уроки истории,
Nor
ведь
is it
она
able
для
to remember the
нынешней
lessons of
плеяды европейских
history. After all, for the current
руководителей и
cast of
евробюрократов
European leaders and Euro
обнулилась после
bureaucrats,
февраля 2022 года.
was reset to zero in February of
Соответственно, и делать
2022.
выводы из прошлого
Thus,
для
drawing
нынешней
the lessons
Европы
of
– это
history
мовитон.
for today's Europe is bad manners.
А это очень опасное
But this is
заблуждение.
a
Мы все
very
знаем, как безжалостна
dangerous
история к
path.
тем,
We
кто
all
забывает ее
know
уроки.
that history is ruthless vis-à-vis
В
those
общем,
who forget its
бывшие наши
lessons.
европейские партнеры,
That's
хотите
our former
истерить,
European partners.
нагнетать и
If you want to
продолжать
get hysterical,
бездоказательно
to
в чем-то
foment
нас
and to continue
обвинять,
levy
дело
baseless
ваше.
accusations, go
Но
right
это без
ahead.
нас.
But
Мы
do
в
that
этом театре
without our
абсурда участвовать не
participation. We
намерены.
won't be
Да мы вам
partaking
там и
in
не
this
нужны.
theatre of the absurd. And you don't need us
Захотите
there.
серьезного
When you
разговора о
decide that you want
европейской
to engage in a
безопасности,
serious
о
discussion
судьбах
about
нашего
European
общего
security, about the
континента,
fate of our
о
common
том, как
continent,
сделать его
about how to
процветающим
make
и
this continent
безопасным для всех,
prosperous and secure for
мы к этому
everybody,
готовы. И вы
we'll be
знаете,
ready.
как нас
You
найти.
know where to find us.
Благодарю за внимание.
I thank you.
I thank the representative of Russian Federation for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Panama.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you,
Agradecemos
Mr. President.
la
We
exposición
are
proporcionada
grateful
por
for
el
the
secretario
detailed
general adjunto
presentation
Miroslav Jenča,
of
que
Undersecretary
nos
General
brinda un
Janša,
panorama más
providing us
completo y
with a more complete
actualizado
picture of the
sobre los
events
hechos
that took
ocurridos
place
en
in Estonia
el viernes
on
19 de
Friday,
septiembre.
the 19th of September.
Queremos darle la bienvenida también a los
We'd also like
ministros
to
que nos
welcome the
distinguen hoy con su
ministers
presencia
distinguishing
reunión.
us today with their presence at this
Hace
meeting.
apenas una semana
Just a
en
week
este
ago,
consejo
this
se
council
reunió para
met
considerar
to consider
con
with
urgencia la
concern
incursión de
the
drones
incursion
rusos
of Russian
en el
drones
espacio aéreo de
into
Polonia.
Polish airspace.
Hoy nos vemos
Today,
nuevamente en la
once
necesidad de
again,
abordar
we
hechos
find
similares,
ourselves addressing
esta
similar
vez con
events,
relación
this
a la
time
incursión de
concerning the
aeronaves de
incursion
combate
of Russian
rusas en el
combat
espacio aéreo de
aircraft
Estonia.
into Estonian airspace.
Estos incidentes cercanos
These
en el tiempo
incidents, so
en
close
que
together
ocurrieron y con la
in time
naturaleza de la
and
amenaza que
of such
representan,
threatening nature,
ilustran un patrón de acciones
illustrate a
que
pattern of
pudieran
actions
socavar
that
la
could
estabilidad
undermine
regional y que
regional
son
stability,
motivo de
and they are
preocupación
a
para
cause of
todos.
concern for us all.
Panamá rechaza
Panama
cualquier acto de
rejects any
intimidación
act
de
of
un Estado
intimidation
contra
of
otro.
one state against
La
another.
violación del espacio
The
aéreo de
violation of
Estonia no
Estonian
puede ser vista
airspace
como un
cannot be
hecho
seen as an
aislado,
isolated
sino
event,
como un acto que
but
amenazaría
rather
la
as an
paz
act
y la
that
seguridad
threatens international
internacionales,
peace and security,
pilares sobre los
the
cuales
very
descansa
pillars
este
upon
Consejo.
which this Council rests.
Señor presidente,
President,
el mundo atraviesa
the
tiempos
world is
particularmente
going through
convulsos,
particularly
donde la
turbulent
proliferación
times
de
where
conflictos
the
en
proliferation
todas
of
las
conflicts
regiones
in all regions
impacta de manera directa y
is directly
desproporcionada a la
and
población civil
disproportionately
y a la
affecting
estabilidad
the civilian
regional.
population and
El
global
cúmulo de estos
stability.
incidentes de carácter
The
intimidatorio
accumulation of these
no
intimidating
contribuye en
incidents
modo
does not
alguno
contribute in any
a la
way
paz.
to
Por el
peace or
contrario,
international stability.
erosionan
On the contrary,
la ya afectada confianza
these
entre los
events
estados
erode trust
y
among
generan
states
un
and create a
clima
climate
de mayor
of
tensión
heightened tension
en un panorama global que ya no se da abasto para sumar más
vulnerability
violaciones al
for
derecho internacional.
collective security, a situation that
Señor
the
presidente,
world can no
el
longer.
conflicto actual en Ucrania sigue sin resolverse y además
In this regard,
amenaza con expandirse.
we see that these
Estas
acts are
acciones en la región
expanding.
así lo demuestran.
Activities in the
A
region are
pesar de
showing
los
this,
esfuerzos
despite
infructuosos
the
e inconclusos que hasta ahora
inconclusive
se han intentado
results
por las
that have been
partes, seguimos
achieved
con la
by
esperanza de que
efforts of
solo
the
el
parties.
diálogo
We still
genuino,
hope
un
that genuine
compromiso
dialogue
decidido
and
y
decisive
la diplomacia pueden poner
diplomacy and
fin
commitment
a este
can put an end
conflicto.
to this conflict.
Aprovechemos
Let us
este
use
espacio en
this
el que hoy
space
se reúnen
where
nuestras máximas
today
autoridades
the
en el
highest
marco del 80
authorities are
aniversario
gathered
de las
together
Naciones
to
Unidas
mark
para
the 80th
retomar estos
anniversary of
esfuerzos
the
y avanzar
United
en la
Nations
dirección
to
correcta.
resume efforts in the
Panamá
right
hace un llamado
direction.
a la
Panama
prudencia
calls for
y reitera
caution,
una vez
and
más
we
la
reiterate once
primacía
again
del
the
principio del
primacy of the
respeto a la
principle
soberanía y
of
la
respect
integridad
for the
territorial de los
sovereignty and
estados,
territorial
en
integrity of
conformidad
states,
plena con los
in
propósitos
full
y
accordance with the
principios
purposes
consagrados
and
en la
principles
Carta de las Naciones
enshrined
Unidas,
in the
a los
United
cuales nos
Nations Charter,
comprometimos hace
to which
80
we
años.
committed
Solo
ourselves
mediante el
more than
cumplimiento
30 years
estricto
ago,
de estos
80 years
principios
ago. Only
podrá
through strict
garantizarse la
adherence to
paz,
these
la
principles can
seguridad y
peace,
la convivencia
security, and
pacífica
peaceful
entre los
coexistence
estados.
among
Muchas
states be
gracias.
guaranteed. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Panama for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Algeria.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, I would like to thank Mr. Miroslav Jenka for his valuable briefing. I would also like to welcome the Foreign Minister of Estonia and all the honorable ministers participating in this meeting. Mr. President, we meet today following recent reports that Russian military aircraft flew into the airspace of the Republic of Estonia on September the 19th. These developments could exacerbate tensions and further escalate the situation in the region. a region that is still suffering from the repercussions of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. On numerous occasions, Algeria has stressed the need to avoid any action or reaction that could inflame tensions. We have also repeatedly stressed the danger of succumbing to the logic of polarization in the context of this conflict. It's imperative to avoid any endeavor that could inflame hostilities or exacerbate their potential repercussions. In this vein, I would like to highlight the following points today. First, we believe that it is important to maintain the momentum of the recent diplomatic effort in order to prevent any escalation that could prolong or expand the conflict. Thereby, it might undermine any progress towards peace and security in the region. Second, it has become necessary to give precedence to communication and coordination in addressing these incidents through a transparent and effective approach. This would avoid any misunderstanding or confusion, and it would help to avoid the recurrence. Last but not least, we would like to reiterate once again our call for the primacy of the language of dialogue and negotiation. We must adhere to diplomatic solutions as the only feasible way forward to reach a just and lasting solution to the conflict. In conclusion, Algeria remains convinced that the realization of peace and security in Ukraine and through it in the region as a whole can only be achieved through the intensification of diplomatic efforts aimed at finding a final solution to this conflict. This should be based on the principles and purposes of the United Nations Charter, taking into account the legitimate security concerns of both parties. My country also reiterates its commitment to support any effort that would contribute to the maintenance of international peace and security in the region. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Algeria for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Guyana.
Thank you, Mr. President, for convening today's meeting at the request of Estonia following the unauthorized entry into its airspace of 3 armed fighter jets reportedly belonging to the Russian Federation. I also thank ASG Janša for his briefing and welcome the participation of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Estonia and other ministers and high-level officials in this meeting. Mr. President, Guyana has taken careful note of the letter dated 20th of September from the permanent representative of Estonia, in which he asserts that this was the 5th violation of Estonia's airspace by the Russian Federation, marking a dangerous escalation and the most serious violation thus far. We have also taken note of the public statement issued by the Russian authorities denying that the 3 jets violated Estonia's airspace. Saturday's incident appears to follow a pattern of similar events in the region that are unfolding in the context of the ongoing armed conflict in Ukraine. When this council met last week to address a similar incident in Poland, we affirmed that the violation of a country's airspace is a serious breach of its territorial integrity and a violation of international law. We also agreed on the need for de-escalation and for the states involved to establish the facts and act responsibly to avoid any further escalation of an already dangerous situation. Today, as we confront another allegation of incursion by the Russian Federation, I would like to stress the following 2 points. First, as we did last week, Guyana calls for restraint and de-escalation and for the facts surrounding this recent incident to be thoroughly clarified. Given that there have been similar incidents in the recent past, it is reasonable to assume that they will continue to occur unless appropriately addressed. In this respect, we underscore the need for the Security Council to have access to detailed and verifiable information regarding the incidents and encourage the relevant parties to cooperate with the United Nations toward that end. Secondly, Guyana recalls the legal obligation of all UN member states to comply strictly with international law, including the provisions of the United Nations Charter and Security Council Resolution 2788. Mr. President, members of the Security Council have a collective responsibility to find ways and means of preventing disputes from escalating, including through diplomatic efforts, and must apply the tools provided in the Charter and relevant conventions for the peaceful settlement of any dispute between states. On the broader question of the ongoing armed conflict between Russia and Ukraine, we reiterate our demand for an immediate and peaceful end to the war and for the full implementation of Security Council Resolution 2774. Any expansion of this conflict will have dire consequences for innocent civilians in the region and for the world at large. This must be avoided at all costs. In closing, Mr. President, I once again urge the Russian Federation to cooperate with the affected states as well as the United Nations in providing the necessary information and finding a peaceful path forward. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Guyana for the statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Sierra Leone.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also thank ASG Yenke for his briefing. We welcome the participation of the representatives of Estonia, Ukraine, and other participants under Rule 37. The letter dated 20 September 2025 from the permanent representative of Estonia reporting a serious violation of its airspace is of grave concern. This report, viewed together with the earlier letter from the permanent representative of Poland on the Russian Federation's drones entering its airspace, similarly reflects an alarming pattern, increasing the risk of a regional conflagration with global consequences. Mr. President, regrettably, the 3 rounds of talks in Istanbul, which led to agreements on exchanges of prisoners of war and civilian detainees, as well as the return of Ukrainian children, and which had raised hopes for a political solution, have not been matched with advancement in the ceasefire and peace agreement negotiations. On the contrary, military operations in Ukraine have intensified and now reached the breach of airspaces of Estonia, Poland, and Romania. The responses from the 3 countries and NATO underscore the gravity of the threat. They signal that prolonging the conflict risks spillover, regional escalation, and global insecurity. Given the adverse implications of a protracted conflict in Europe, the Council and the wider international community must intensify efforts towards peace. Sierra Leone has consistently called for an end to this war, urging the parties to embrace diplomacy and agree to a ceasefire that prevents further death and suffering. The humanitarian toll is devastating, with over 6,500 civilians having been killed in Ukraine this year alone, including rising numbers of children among the dead and injured. More than 10 million people have been displaced, creating the largest refugee crisis in Europe since the Second World War. Mr. President, Sierra Leone reiterates that the UN Charter enshrines the principles of sovereignty, territorial integrity, and the peaceful settlement of disputes. Article 2.3 obliges member states to resolve disputes by peaceful means while refraining from the threat of use of force. The disregard of these principles and international law, the repeated resort to force, and the inability to secure ceasefires are deeply troubling. Aware of the consequences of this conflict, which could plunge the region into chaos, we call for measured responses by NATO and individual states, making use of Article 4 consultations to de-escalate and renew political dialogue. We commend the ongoing efforts by the United States, European leaders, and other mediators, and this Council to seek a peaceful resolution and a sustained political engagement at the highest levels. We again call on the parties to engage in genuine negotiations towards a political settlement that opposes Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders, while addressing the legitimate security concerns of all parties. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Sierra Leone for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to thank ASG Jansha for his briefing. We also welcome the distinguished Foreign Minister of Estonia, other ministers, and the EU High Representative to this meeting. President, prolonged and intense conflicts, no matter how localized, create a vortex of instability with spillover effects that invariably affect regional and global stability. And what we are witnessing around us today is a practical manifestation of this fundamental truth about conflicts. The ongoing conflict in Ukraine, now into its fourth year, has generated numerous challenges, both for the regional and international peace and stability. And Pakistan, alongside our fellow council members, has repeatedly drawn attention to the negative consequences of this conflict and the need to bring it to an end. We take note of Estonia's letter of 20th September addressed to this council informing about violations of its airspace. Pakistan is an ardent proponent and strong adherent to the UN Charter and its principles. Sovereignty and territorial integrity of all member states are cornerstone principles of the UN Charter, are sacrosanct and must be respected universally. Pakistan remains deeply perturbed by the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, especially its humanitarian consequences that have adversely impacted the lives of millions of people in the region. Cessation of hostilities and return to diplomacy remain the only path for achieving sustainable peace. In line with our clear and consistent position, Pakistan has always called upon the parties to demonstrate restraint, avoid escalation, and scrupulously adhere to the international humanitarian law. We firmly believe that only a meaningful dialogue which addresses the security concerns of all sides is anchored in the principles of UN Charter and international law and respects the relevant multilateral agreements can help secure peace, a peace that is both just and lasting. Pakistan stands ready to support all regional and international efforts that can pave the way for a peaceful resolution of the current conflict. President, I would also like to take this opportunity to welcome the new permanent representatives of the United States to the Council. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Pakistan for the statement. Before giving the floor to the United States, I'd like to welcome the new permanent representative of the United States, Ambassador Michael Wartz, to the Security Council. We look forward to working closely with you in the coming days. You have the floor.
Well, thank you, Mr. President, and it's very good to be with you and this esteemed body for the first time. Thank you, ASG Yensha, for your briefing. And of course, I too welcome the participation of Estonia's foreign minister in this briefing as well. Colleagues, just 9 days ago, this council met to discuss Russia's violation of Poland's airspace with a large number of military drones. In that meeting, The United States urged Russia to end the war in Ukraine and stop actions that could risk it escalating into a broader conflict. Instead, on September 19th, Russia again violated the airspace of a NATO member when 3 armed military aircraft flew 10 nautical miles into Estonian airspace, coming within 15 miles of the Estonian parliament. And as we said 9 days ago, the United States stands by our NATO allies in the face of these airspace violations, and I want to take this first opportunity to repeat and to emphasize the United States and our allies will defend every inch of NATO territory. Russia must urgently stop such dangerous behavior. At a time when President Trump in the United States has been focused and spent an enormous amount of time and effort to end this horrific war between Russia and Ukraine, we expect Russia to seek ways to de-escalate, not risk expansion. This event, following on the heels of the Russian drone incursion into Polish airspace, creates the impression that Russia either wants to escalate and pull more countries into this conflict with Ukraine, or doesn't have full control of those who operate its fighter planes and drones. So either scenario is very disconcerting, given that Russia is obviously a nuclear power with global reach. And so I once again urge Russia as a permanent member of this council to uphold international peace and security, to respect the sovereignty of its neighbors, to cease violating their airspace, and I call on Russia to negotiate directly with Ukraine to end that war. I thank you, and I very much am honored and look forward to working with each of you. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the United States for the statement. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as the representative of the Republic of Korea. To begin, my gratitude goes to ASG Yencha for the statement. Colleagues, the Republic of Korea is seriously concerned by the most recent in a series of deeply alarming incidents, this time impacting the territorial integrity of Estonia. On Friday, we were dismayed by reports of fighter jets from the Russian Federation violating Estonian airspace and remaining there over the Gulf of Finland for a total of 12 minutes. We note that this incident led to some countries responding by scrambling their jets in yet another troubling event over European territory. This once again appears to represent a significant breach of the sovereignty of United Nations member state, which could further threaten European and international security and simultaneously erode diplomatic efforts to end the war in Ukraine. Friday's incidents in the Estonian skies represent just the latest occurrence in a series of concerning actions following the recently reported Russian drone breaches of Poland and Romania. Colleagues, at this Council's 12th September meeting, in response to the violation of Poland's territorial integrity, my delegation warned that this incident was a resounding wake-up call and could mark a dangerous turning point. One, where the war in Ukraine may no longer be able to be contained, instead spreading incrementally and insidiously further into Europe. Today, we reiterate our expanding concern over yet another seeming escalation. This incident suggests a troubling pattern that could proliferate and interconnect, raising the risk of grave miscalculation over even miscommunication. And it vividly illustrates the urgency of decisively ending this war. Colleagues, we remind once again the Security Council of Russia and the DPRK's ongoing unlawful military cooperation, which violates multiple Security Council resolutions and directly threats peace and security in Europe and Asia, it must stop immediately. In conclusion, alongside the international community, the Republic of Korea continues to support diplomatic efforts to bring about lasting peace in this region. And I resume my functions as President of the Council. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Margus Charkuna, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Estonia.
Your Excellencies, thank you, President. Please allow me to thank the Presidency for convening the Security Council meeting at such a short notice. And I also would like to thank ASG Jensa for his valuable briefing. Ladies and gentlemen, what brings us here today is alarming. On 19 September 2025, 3 armed Russian MiG-31 fighter jets deliberately entered Estonian airspace in violation of our territorial integrity. They remained in our skies for 12 minutes, penetrating up to 10 kilometers deep and covering nearly 100 kilometers inside our sovereign territory. These are the hard facts based on solid evidence, whatever Russia is claiming. And let me show you the screenshot from our most modern radar screenshot. So you can see here as well, the red line is a violation of Estonian territory and sovereignty. You can see it very clearly. This is a fact. This is not something else. So here you can say, you can also see the radar screenshot where Russia fighter jets entered, where they were, and how they went out. They were warned already before. There was a very clear communication on all different channels as well, visibly. And there was no response, and just Russian fighter jets, they continued the violation of Estonian and also NATO airspace for 12 minutes, 100 kilometers. And this is a lot. And these are the hard evidences for that. Also, there are pictures of these fighter jets, and it is very clear that these fighter jets, they carried as well missiles. All of them, they carried missiles, and they were combat-ready planes. And you can see from here as well, Russian representatives, that these are the photos which really were taken during this heavy violation of NATO and Estonian airspace. So what I want to say, that violation is crystal clear, and Russia is lying again, as it has been lied before several times. We remember the occupation of Georgia, 2008, 2014, Crimea, 2022, aggression against Ukraine started. So please don't lie again. Hard evidence is here. So it is a dangerous escalation. It was a 4th violation of Estonia's airspace by Russia this year alone. By this one was deeper, longer, with 3 armed aircraft simultaneously and just minutes flight time away from Tallinn, our capital. I want to recall that member states' sovereignty and territorial integrity on land, at sea, and in the air must be respected at all times. So this was yet another reckless and flagrant violation of the United Nations Charter and of international law by our neighbor. We are here today because this violation of our sovereignty and threat of use of force concerns not only Estonia, but the entire international community. The 19 September incursion was not an isolated act, but part of a broader pattern of Russian provocations against its neighbors, while the permanent member of the Security Council continues its full-scale war of aggression against Ukraine. On 9th of September, Russia presently violated Poland's borders by sending 19 drones into Poland's airspace. On 13th of September, a Russian attack drone flew for almost an hour over Romanian territory. Russian drones have been also found in Latvia and Lithuania, our neighboring countries. Russia's dangerous behavior cannot be tolerated. To do so would seriously undermine not only the United Nations Charter and the international law, but would set very dangerous precedent, encouraging further aggression, fueling regional and global tensions, and ultimately endangering global peace and security. Ladies and gentlemen, for the first time in 34 years since Estonia joined the United Nations, we were obliged to ask the presidency to convene this meeting in the spirit of the preventive diplomacy and in order to stop immediately attempts at further escalation by Russia. We use this occasion to call again on the Russian Federation loud and clear to cease, without delay, its war of aggression against sovereign Ukraine and to abide by the obligations enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations. We call on Russia to end all provocations and threats against its neighbors' sovereignty and territorial integrity. The international community must stand firm in demanding an end to these blatant breaches of the United Charter in order to prevent further escalation and to ensure international peace and security. Ladies and gentlemen, Estonia is convinced that all responsible members of the international community should always call out such outrageous actions by any member of the United Nations, and even more so by a permanent member of the Security Council, entrusted with a special responsibility to safeguard international peace and security. And yet, words are not enough. As Russia itself has become a real threat to global peace and security, we need to exercise collectively maximum pressure on Russia, forcing it to just and lasting peace in Ukraine and forcing it to abandon its criminal, neo-colonial and imperial ambitions. Together we can hold Russia accountable for its crime of aggression against Ukraine, for the war crimes and crimes against humanity it has committed since 2014, and for its ongoing violations of international treaties and agreements it has pledged to uphold. Impunity, appeasement and further concessions would only embolden Putin and would lead to new crimes. We can succeed only if acting decisively together in defense of the United Nations Charter and the international law. Finally, let me assure that the members of the Security Council and wider audience that Russia's threats and provocations are not going to weaken our resolve to support Ukraine in its defense against the Russian aggression. Just and lasting peace in Ukraine will strengthen the multilateral system based on international law, with the United Nations and its Charter at the core, as well as international peace and security across the globe. Thank you, President.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Tsakna for the statement. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Ms. Kaja Kallas, High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy and Vice President of the European Commission.
Thank you, Mr. President, Excellencies. The United Nations was founded on a set of shared values and principles, foremost the pursuit of peace and security. Although these values are being continuously tested and tried, the adherence to these values is still what brings us together in this room. There is one country present here in this room which is actively seeking to undermine the values and principles the nations of the United Nations have committed upholding. Last week, Russia once again violated international law and the sovereignty of an European country. For 12 minutes, 3 armed Russian fighter jets blatantly violated Estonian airspace. The same type of fighter jets that regularly bomb innocent civilians in Kiev. The recent violation of Estonian airspace is unprecedented in both scale and recklessness. It was a deliberate provocation which could have ended with devastating results. This comes after Russian violation of both Polish as well as Romanian airspace with drones a week earlier. It cannot be that Russia accidentally violates 3 times in 2 weeks European airspace. And if it was accidentally, it was a mistake, there has been plenty of time for Russian Federation to apologize and say, sorry, we made a mistake. Instead, we see a pattern. Russia is testing European borders, probing our resolve, undermining the security of the whole of Europe. Russia will continue to provoke as long as we allow it. Therefore, the United Nations and the international community must clearly condemn such actions. It is a breach of the UN Charter, which obliges all states to respect the sovereignty and territorial integrity of other countries. And it is particularly cynical that a permanent member of the UN Security Council, entrusted with safeguarding peace, actively seeks to undermine it. Russia's aggression against Ukraine continues, and now it is extending provocations against the European Union members. Russia hopes that it might force us to draw our focus away from supporting Ukraine and focus solely on our own security. Well, let me be very clear. European security starts with Ukraine. And any provocation against EU member states will only strengthen our resolve to support Ukraine. I say this openly to Russian representatives in this room. Your government's actions are reckless, dangerous, and go against the very principles of the United Nations. Our response is united and firm. First, we stand in full solidarity with Estonia, Poland, and Romania. Second, we collectively condemn Russian sovereignty violations. And third, the European Union will continue to help strengthen European defense and deterrence together with NATO. And fourth, for every test or every violation of our security, our resolve to support Ukraine grows. Russia cannot be allowed to normalize such behavior. International law is not optional. The sovereignty and security of one member state is sovereignty and security of all. I call on you to condemn Russia's violation of Estonia's airspace. Thank you.
I thank Her Excellency Ms. Kallas for the statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Radoslav Sikorski, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Poland.
Mr. President, Excellencies, this Emergency Security Council meeting has been called because a mere week after Russia sent drones into Poland, 3 Russian MiG-31 fighter jets with their transponders off entered Estonian airspace without authorization and lingered for 12 minutes. On the same day, 2 Russian fighter jets violated the security zone over the Polish drilling platform in our economic zone in the Baltic Sea. If these were accidents, why not immediately acknowledge them and apologize? We have given Russia a pass in the past in such circumstances. But we have not heard any apologies, only lies. Together with the intensification of attacks on Ukraine, they seem to be an eloquent comment on, quote, moving from confrontation to dialogue, end quote, promised by Vladimir Putin in Alaska. These breaches of airspace are suspect because they are an escalation of hybrid war which Russia has waged against the West for years. Murders of politicians, journalists, human rights defenders, and defectors, cyber attacks against hospitals and financial institutions, arsons, including in Poland, UK, and Lithuania, postal packages containing incendiary devices all over Europe, including Germany, attacks on Ukrainian embassies, in addition to standard espionage and disinformation. Excellencies, this Council has a responsibility to send a clear message that such provocations will not be tolerated. It must stand in solidarity with Estonia, Romania, Poland, and all nations whose sovereignty is threatened by systemic Russian aggression. To the representatives of Russia, I have this to say. We know you don't care for international law and you are incapable of living in peace with your neighbors. Your insane nationalism contains a lust for domination that will not cease until you realize that the age of empires is over and that your empire will not be rebuilt. Every drone strike by the heroes of the armed forces of Ukraine, may God bless them, brings this day closer. Your 3-day special military operation can't even conquer Donbass for 10 years now. But the potential for criminal, catastrophic Russian mistakes is still there. By ordering mobilization in 1914, you precipitated the start of World War I, which bled Europe white and led to your Bolshevik Revolution. By signing the Hitler-Stalin Pact, you helped launch World War II, the bloodiest in history. By Sovietizing Central Europe, you caused the Cold War. Don't start another one. We are peaceful democracies who have studiously avoided actively joining your attempt to reconquer Ukraine. But we will not be intimidated. I have only one request to the Russian government. If another missile or aircraft enters our space without permission, deliberately or by mistake, and gets shot down and the wreckage falls on NATO territory, please don't come here to whine about it. You have been warned. Thank you.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Sikorski for the statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Johann Wadefu, Federal Minister for Foreign Affairs of Germany.
Mr. President, 12 minutes. 12 minutes in which 3 Russian fighter jets brazenly ventured into Estonian airspace. 12 minutes in which they made their way almost to the Estonian capital, to Tallinn. What happened early Friday morning marked a further dangerous escalation by Russia. The incursion came just over a week after more than 20 Russian drones had entered Polish airspace. Once again, in Estonia, Russia violated, without any provocation, the territorial integrity of one of its neighbors, and thus one of the fundamental principles of the UN Charter. We condemn this grave violation of international law. This is not the behavior of a state seeking to preserve global peace and security, but one of recklessly disregarding international norms. Together with our partners, Germany stands firmly in solidarity with Estonia. We stand together against those who seek to use military coercion to undermine our sovereignty, freedom, and solidarity. The most recent alarming incidents bring to light 2 significant insights. First, Russia's ongoing aggression is not only directed against Ukraine and its people, rather, in its reckless behavior, Russia poses a serious danger to regional security as well as to global peace and stability. Second, there were many initiatives for negotiations, most recently under the strong leadership of the United States. Ukraine is ready to engage and has repeatedly offered an immediate and unconditional ceasefire. Nonetheless, Russia has repeatedly chosen not only to continue, but to intensify its aggression This must end. Let there be no doubt, reckless provocations will not work. This is not just a problem for Russia's immediate neighbors. This is a problem for all of us, united here in our commitment to the UN Charter and its principles. Germany stands for these principles. Russia does not. We will not rest until a sustainable and just peace in Ukraine is achieved, a peace that is rooted in the principles of the UN Charter and negotiated with Ukraine sitting at the table. An unconditional ceasefire is urgently needed to stop the bloodshed and to lay the foundation to build trust for sincere negotiations. The people of Ukraine, as well as the people of Estonia and Poland, just as the people of every country, have the right to live in peace and security. It is our shared responsibility as UN member states to hold those accountable who endanger peace and security. I thank you.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Vade for the statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Andrei Sybiha, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Ukraine.
Thank you for organizing this important meeting. Just 10 days ago, this Council held an emergency meeting requested by Poland after being intruded by 2,000 Russian drones. Today, we are meeting at the urgent request of Estonia after 3 Russian jets violated its airspace. What's next? Which other emergency meeting will we have to hold in the coming weeks? Who will be the next country dealing with Russia's provocations? None of these developments were accidental. No, Moscow does this on purpose. A country occupying a permanent seat in this council is destroying international peace and security it is supposed to maintain. The logic is simple. Russia escalates to force everyone to play by its rules. It wants to impose the law of the jungle upon everyone. Might make right. Our goal is the opposite. We must make Russia play by our rules. We have such rules accepted by everyone. They called the UN Charter. It is important that existing tools to be in the Security Council meeting or invocation of NATO Article 4 are actively used. However, political action should be backed by strong practical steps. Weak or late responses will only encourage further aggression. Europe is not at war with Russia, but Russia is at war with Europe. And the only way to safeguard peace is to respond with strength and unity. The best way to prevent a larger war in Europe is to increase support for Ukraine. If you help us end this war sooner with respect to the UN Charter, Russia will not expand it to other nations. Mr. President, a strong response means that a threat should not be escorted neither for 12 minutes nor for 1 minute. It should be neutralized. We reiterate our readiness for air defense integration. This is our European sky over Ukraine and other European nations. This is our common security space, and we must have a common sky shield to protect us all. Ukraine is the only country in the world countering regular massive air attacks of more than 500,000 drones and missiles, and we are ready to share experience and join forces. An integrated European air defense system combining intelligence, early warning, and active interception is essential. We have the capabilities, experience, and alliances, but action must be decisive, adequate, and swift. Other elements of a strong response include devastating sanctions, pressure on, and strong deterrence packages for Ukraine. The Russian war machine can only be stopped through strength, not weakness. Wait and see is not a strategy. Let's abandon wishful thinking. Russia poses an existential threat to Europe, and it will not disappear if we close our eyes. Ukraine has learned many bitter lessons in the past. What we now see in Poland and Estonia reminds of how Russian aggression against Ukraine started. Hybrid attacks and escalation, unmarked soldiers, violations of state border, and other steps. We can see this pattern repeating, but in another forms. The only effective way to counter this escalation is to respond with strength and unity. In conclusion, we reiterate that aggression against any European nation threatens the security of all. Only united action can prevent escalation and preserve peace in Europe. We stand in solidarity with our friendly Estonia, with the Estonian government and people, and we are ready to contribute to our shared security. Thank you.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Sibiha for the statement. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Mrs. Oana Silvia Toiu, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Romania.
Mr. President, thank you for this opportunity to take the floor at this emergency meeting of the UN Security Council, where we meet again to defend the principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity. I also want to thank Assistant Secretary General Miroslav Jenka for his briefing. Outside the Council chamber, our conversations focus on the UN80 and the importance of fundamental principles enshrined in the UN Charter. It is dismaying that one permanent member of this Security Council is out of sync and blatantly violates these principles. Russia has repeatedly violated the sovereign airspace of European countries. Now it is Estonia. Last week it was Romania. Before that, Poland. In the case of Romania, in most of these cases, there were involved drones of Iranian origin. We strongly condemn Russia's reckless and dangerous behavior, which directly endangers even more international peace and security. We stand together with Estonia, Poland, and our partners and allies in rejecting such behavior and defending key principles of the Charter and international law. Today, I speak on behalf of Romania. We are the country with the largest border with Ukraine of all its peaceful neighbors, and one of the countries whose sovereign airspace was tested by Russia on various occasions since its war of aggression against Ukraine. At the same time, the war triggered by Russia might affect security in the Black Sea, unless, together with our neighbors, together with our international partners, we invest in defensive and early warning instruments, such as common maritime security approach, both within the European Union, among the Black Sea participants, and NATO. We need to address the insecurity in this key region of Europe with global relevance that affects maritime security, commercial shipping lanes, both regionally and globally, as well as access to vital goods to world markets, including grains, key commodities, and food supplies. Even a perceived lack of reaction from the international community, especially this Council, might encourage future provocations, but we can also do the opposite and discourage them. We need to firmly reject, once and for all, this unjustified and unprovoked aggression against Ukraine. We all want peace, but that also means that we need strength, and strength is achieved together. Mr. President, within the international community, most of the world nations are aligned to the need to protect the principles of the UN Charter. We join previous speakers' call to Russia to stop all provocations and threats against the sovereignty and territorial integrity of other states. Russia should not be emboldened to continue such behavior. In this context, my government welcomes the efforts undertaken by the United States, the European Union, and world leaders to put an end to Russia's war of aggression, and especially respects the effort of Ukraine, and we stand together for peace. Action is of essence now. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Her Excellency Mrs. Toiu for the statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. David Van Hill, Minister for Foreign Affairs, Minister for Asylum and Migration of Kingdom of the Netherlands.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I have the honor to speak on behalf of the Benelux countries, Belgium, Luxembourg, and my own country, the Kingdom of the Netherlands. The Benelux countries welcome that the Council urgently addresses these unprovoked violations of Estonian airspace. We condemn these violations in the strongest possible terms. It is yet another clear and unacceptable violation by Russia of the territorial territory of a sovereign nation. And this is not an isolated incident. It cannot be ignored. it has been less than 2 weeks ago that in this very council you discussed the violation of Polish airspace. And we are, unfortunately, seeing a wider pattern of Russian provocations against its neighbors while Russia continues its full-scale war of aggression against Ukraine. This incident demonstrates that if Russia's aggression remains unchecked, it is bound to repeat itself. We call on this Council and all Member States to make clear that this reckless behavior is not only unacceptable, but also presents clear risks to peace and security. It is imperative that we all protect the UN Charter and international law, and the territorial integrity and sovereignty of all nations must be respected. These are the cornerstones of 80 years of the United Nations. The Benelux countries will defend these principles, standing shoulder to shoulder with Estonia. The path to peace is clear. The Russian Federation needs to end its war of aggression in Ukraine and choose the path of meaningful negotiations for a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace. And all the members of this Council and all UN member states have a responsibility to play their role in safeguarding global stability. That means holding Russia back from further destabilizing international peace and security in the interest of us all. Thank you, Mr. President.
Russia has again shown its reckless and lawless behavior, violations, and its broader campaign of malicious activities against other countries illustrates the seriousness of Russia's threat to international security. It only strengthens our resolve in facing this threat by upholding our sovereignty and territorial integrity, as well as further intensifying our long-standing support to Ukraine. Over the past weeks, Russia has increased its attacks against Ukraine. Last week alone, Russia launched more than 1,500 strike drones, 1,280 guided aerial bombs, and 50 missiles against Ukraine, according to Ukrainian reports. These are not the actions of a country that seeks peace. The Nordic countries support a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace based on the UN Charter and international law. A peace must respect Ukraine's independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. President, we need to remind ourselves that Russia is waging a war of aggression against Ukraine in blatant violation of international law. Russia could end its war tomorrow. Until it does, the Nordics stand undeterred in face of Russia's illegal actions. I thank you.
I thank Her Excellency Ms. Malmö Steingard for the statement. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Ms. Babia Bratze, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Latvia.
Mr. President, I deliver this statement on behalf of two Baltic states, Lithuania and my own country, Latvia. I thank the Presidency of the Council for convening this meeting, and I thank Assistant Secretary General Janša for the briefing. Lithuania and Latvia stand in full solidarity with our neighbor and ally, Estonia. On 12 September, this Council strongly condemned the violation of Polish airspace by a massive Russian drone incursion. We expressed our full solidarity with Poland at that meeting, and we warned of the risk of further provocations by Russia. Now it is Estonia calling this meeting in response to another grave and deliberate escalation by Russia. Mr. President, Europe has witnessed a growing number of Russia's non-conventional attacks, ranging from GPS jamming, sabotage, attempts to place explosives on DHL planes, to drone incursions. Russia's war in Ukraine and Russia's flagrant violation of Estonia's airspace once again demonstrates Russia's complete disregard for the authority of this Council, and also for the demands expressed by the international community in numerous UN General Assembly resolutions. And Mr. President, let me say, we are not facing a Ukraine crisis. We are faced with a Russia crisis. As we speak at this emergency meeting, Russia continues to target and destroy Ukrainian cities, critical civilian infrastructure, kill innocent civilians, medical personnel, children, women, all in pursuit of a land grab. Contrary to the efforts of the President of the United States and European and Ukrainian partners, Russia doesn't seek peace. Russia's imperial and colonial ambitions brutally violate UN Charter. Remember Georgia in 2008, Crimea in 2014, and then the full-scale aggression against Ukraine since 2022. Mr. President, today in 1939, Soviet and Nazi forces held a joint military parade to celebrate invading and partitioning Poland. We will never accept Russia's attempts to attack, dominate, intimidate, or establish a sphere of influence over its neighbors. Empires are dead. We, the free and democratic countries, will continue to invest in our deterrence, defense, resilience. We are working closely with our allies to deploy additional capabilities to ensure that future Russian provocations are not tolerated. And we ask the Council to continue to be engaged on upholding international peace and security. We are committed to it. Yet, ironically, again, it is the aggressive, revanchist behavior of Russia, permanent member of this August Council, who is gravely undermining global security. So Latvia and Lithuania call on this Council and all UN member states to condemn Russia's aggressive actions in the strongest terms. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Her Excellency Ms. Baiba Bratze for the statement. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. The meeting is adjourned.